What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, it is Big Ten East week. Excited that we're here. You know, Big Ten and SEC. You can't talk about college football without talking about those two conferences. And the Big Ten East, definitely the better division, as we might be in our last season or two of divisions of the Big Ten. So excited we get to record this episode and talk about, hey, some of the best teams in college football.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's one of these that, you know, you start to look at the inequity in teams on the East and the West in the Big Ten. You start to wonder, why is it scheduled this way? There's some of these teams that I'm really high on, but shoot, the schedule they play, I mean, it's like what we've talked about before. They might be a better team, but their schedule is going to kind of eat them up, and it's not going to show. They might have a worse record than last year. So excited to dive into it.
Speaking of schedules, let's start at the top. So as we've done with every other conference, going to go in order of win total. So let's start at the top. Ohio State, win total set at 11. But Daniel, what if I told you they have one of the more difficult schedules in the Big Ten? And this is always difficult because teams like Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, their schedule always looks worse because they can't play themselves, right? Everybody else in the Big Ten East, their schedules, they're going to get credit for playing Ohio State.
Include Ohio State, right?
Right. But what if I told you, even with that included, Ohio State, one of the tougher schedules in the Big Ten. So they draw Notre Dame in a non-conference game. That game is at home. You play Michigan State and Penn State on the road. You draw Wisconsin out of the Big Ten West. So not an easy schedule for Ohio State, but Vegas seems pretty confident, Daniel. That win total set at 11. How are you feeling about the Buckeyes?
I think that Vegas is a bunch of cowards
for a whole number
going at 11, because I think that's the number. I'm going to go at 11. But here, let me tell you why. I mean, this is going to be one of the most fun teams to talk about because you've got obviously just all the talent on offense. CJ Stroud, he's going to be challenging for the Heisman Trophy. He's going to be one of the top NFL draft picks next year, we presume. Trevian Henderson, one of, if not the premier back in college football. So when you've got that tandem in your backfield, that's probably going to overshadow everything else except Jackson Smith and Chigba. Was it the Rose Bowl last year? And he had like 300 yards receiving, 18 touchdowns, something like that. He was phenomenal, but he actually, you had 2 first-round receivers last year leave, and, Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, but the leading receiver was Jackson Smith and Chigba. 1,600 yards, 95 receptions, 9 touchdowns. So him coming back, that's huge. Ohio State still, after losing 2 first-round picks, is one of the deepest receiving rooms in the country. Still returning. Yeah, it's
it might still be the best.
And they got 3 out of their 5 returning offensive linemen. Paris Johnson, he's probably going to be a first-round pick next year at left tackle. So you've really got immense NFL talent on the offensive side of the ball. Mayan Williams is just a cheat code as a backup running back, very explosive. My big questions this year is going to be on the defensive side of the ball. So looking through, there is talent galore. Zach Harrison, JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, all these guys on the defensive line should equal production. Last year they did not. We talked about Jim Knowles coming in from Oklahoma State to be the defensive coordinator. I do think it's a great move. I was obviously very candid in our stock episode of, buying stock or selling stock or overrated, underrated, if you will. I would sell some stock on Ohio State because based on them being a 12-0 national champion, not going to lose a game this year, I think they lose a game. So that being said, that's why I have them at 11-1. If I had a gun to my head, I would pick them at 10-2 before I would pick them at 12-0. again, I'm saying gun to my head. I think that this is an 11-1 ball club. As I look through the schedule, you were talking about how difficult it is. Obviously, they start with Notre Dame. I do think they win that game probably by a couple touchdowns. Nonetheless, it's going to be a very interesting, difficult game. They do draw Wisconsin out of the West. And then game I'm circling is at Michigan State. It's right before a bye week. And I think that that could be an area or an issue this year. They're not going to lose to Michigan this year because they lost last year. I think that even if Michigan was returning offensive coordinator, we'll get into all that. If Michigan was, trending even further up, I think that Ohio State would find a way to win that game. So, yeah, that's where I'm at with it. I think their talent is immense. They're going to be one of the most talented teams in the country, but no reason for me to pick the. I'm going push. So 11-1.
11-1. I'll just buy any stock you're selling because I am sky high in Ohio State. I'm going over. I'm going 12-0 for this team. I think they run through the Big Ten like they did in 2018 on their way to that classic Fiesta Bowl loss against Clemson and Trevor Lawrence. This team, to put it in perspective, Daniel, we talked about this previously earlier in the offseason, but teams like Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, when you accumulate talent like they do, typically their returning production ranks 60s to 90s just because every year you're getting players drafted.
They're at the top of the team talent composite.
Right, every year. And so it's like, hey, this sophomore that you forgot about that was a 5-star is now – he was riding the bench because of the talent in front of him. Now he's gotten experience, and now he's starting. And it's like, oh, yeah. So returning production, you never really look at the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Alabamas, except for when it caught my eye this year that Ohio State is top 25 in the country in returning production, which is insane for a team this talented. When you accumulate talent like Ohio State does, eventually it's all going to click. And we'll preview, I think it might click this year. We're not making national picks yet, but I'm leaning towards, I think it might click this year. I think it's going to click enough for them to go 12-0. This offense, we saw what it was capable of last year. Stupid good. And to be able to lose 2 first-round wide receivers, and you mentioned this, Daniel, to lose Jamison Williams, who was on the roster in 2020, he transfers out last season, goes to Bama, was immediately their wide receiver 1, also a first-round draft pick. So in the last 2 seasons, they've lost 3 first-round wide receivers. To lose that and to look at this room and be like, they might be better at receiver this year, it is kind of scary. Obviously, right. CJ Stroud's going to be the highlight, returning quarterback. He'll be a Heisman favorite, or already is a betting favorite with the Heisman. And that being because, people don't win it twice in a row, right? Yeah. So, CJ Stroud's going to be your betting favorite. Trevian Henderson, arguably, he's for sure one of the best 2 running backs in the country. I think him and Bijan, you could argue either way, and I'd hear your argument. But as a true freshman, he was that way as well. So sophomore, the offensive line, I think is going to be top 3 in the country, led by these 2 tackles. Paris Johnson and DeJuan. I'm just going to look and see. DeJuan Jones. There you go. Those will be 2 all Big Ten tackles. It turns to defense though, right? Offense was fine last year. It was the defense that struggled, especially against the run. So in the snow against Michigan, got it run down their throat. Against Oregon early in the year, you can run the ball on them. They struggled. There's talent on this defensive line. And, after watching some of their games last year, a lot of their problems were run fits. So people just being out of position. You've got a potential, he was quiet last year, but Zach Harrison has a potential to have a comeback year and be a first-round draft pick off the edge. Remember the name. He was a true freshman last year, enrolled very, very late, enrolled July 12th. JT Tuimoloau, former number 1 overall player, 5-star defensive end. He's now a sophomore. And again, he enrolled very late last year.
You said mid-July?
July 12th is when he enrolled. So
because he was one of those that didn't announce on signing day.
Right.
And he kept
July
trying 4th, to push his decision back. Right.
So awkward time to join. He wasn't going to get any playing time last year. Now he's had a full season and off season in the program. Interior defensive tackle, like Ohio State go from being a bad run defense to being one of the best defensive lines in the country.
Yeah.
Their secondary I'm going to look at. They return some starters. Josh Proctor is not a returning starter, but he's someone I'll look at in circles. And, I can circle and go contract year. He's someone who could pop and be, a top draft pick at corner. So I'm very high on this Ohio State team. I'm a big believer in Jim Knowles coming in and fixing some of these fits on defense. I look at the Big Ten again in July, or excuse me, we're in June. No one pops out to me that can challenge them. And I think, how good does their defense have to be? If they have the number one offense in college football, which I think they will, and I think it's going to be by a significant margin that they're the number one offense, can I get a top 20 defense out of them? And if I can, I think 12-0 is for sure on the table. They're going to be double-digit favorites in almost every game. I think at Penn State, you're going to see them might be single-digit favorites there, maybe by a touchdown. But I think I've said enough. I'm very high on Ohio State. So I'm going over. You're going push. We both think they're going to be a good team. I'm just higher than you are.
Well, I felt a certain obligation for selling stock before to stay true to my word. And I would try to disprove it. But no, I mean, they're going to be a phenomenal team.
They're going to be a good football team. A good football team last year, the defending Big Ten East champions, the Michigan Wolverines. They finally
Big Ten champs.
They were. That's right. Big Ten champs. Sorry, we're talking about the Big Ten East. Big Ten champs, Michigan. They beat Ohio State. They get over that hump. They go to the college football playoff. They win the Big Ten. Phenomenal year for Michigan. Weird offseason. So Harbaugh, he wanted the Vikings job, like for sure wanted it,
and said that,
and didn't get it offered. His coordinators leave, but expectations are still that Michigan is right back up there. So 9.5 the win total. So Vegas is thinking so, up there as well. Where are you going with the Wolverines?
Yeah, it's kind of, I wonder how the Harbaugh, Thanksgiving dinner goes with John and Jim, because John lends him Mike McDonald to be his defensive coordinator and then hires him back as his own defensive coordinator in Baltimore. So that's, you're not going to pass that up, but, becoming a NFL defensive coordinator. And then, Josh Gaddis, you mentioned, the coordinators both leaving, this being a weird offseason. Josh Gaddis made a play for being the head coach when there was talk that, Jim Harbaugh might leave. And I think he would have had a very good shot at getting it because of the timing of everything. And that kind of, like you said, it was a very awkward offseason. So that, led him to go to Miami, and Miami, we've already talked about, of course, and how their staff looks great. But then you look at what the season's supposed to be with Michigan, and it's like they have so many returning players on offense. How is this going to, incorporate itself with the new offensive coordinator? Matt Weiss coming in, Cade McNamara returning as the starting quarterback. You and I are both high on JJ McCarthy. We're both, recruiting guys. So we both think that he's ultimately what's going to take their offense to the next level. He had some explosive plays last year in relief. Blake Corum, the returning leading rusher after Hassan Haskins. He had 900 yards himself. I didn't realize it had gotten to that many, averaging almost 7 yards a carry with 11 touchdowns. So they were a very strong rushing team. I expect him to kind of fill in the Haskins role, and for Donovan Edwards to kind of fill in his role. He's a very explosive running back. He was playing third fiddle last year. You'll see a lot of throws to him, regardless of who's the offensive coordinator and what they're doing. He's got tremendous hands. They throw the ball to him down the field as well. So I think that's a big deal. All five top returning, all five leading receivers from last year are returning. So that's big in that you have continuity there, whether it is McNamara or eventually McCarthy. But, defensively, they only have 3 returning starters. Obviously, you have the bookend, Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo both gone. So just the production alone there on the edges is going to be tough to replace. But big time linebackers, big time safeties, they're all gone. So do they replace it? I think it's going to be a tough time. Kind of going through their schedule. I do think that they kind of have a good start to the season because Colorado State, I don't think, is going to offer much of an opponent. Neither is Hawaii or UConn. All of those are at home. And then their first Big Ten matchup is Maryland. And I think that they overmatch Maryland pretty significantly. Their first test is at Iowa. So looking through the schedule, obviously I think that they do lose to Ohio State this year. But their Western opponents, I mean, they're playing Illinois, Nebraska, and I think they're going to be able to take care of that. So I do think that they take care of Michigan State this year because Michigan State got them last year.
Hey, 0-2 against Mel Tucker.
Got them 2 years in a row. It is at home. I think they probably lose to Penn State. So I think that Michigan's going to kind of get back to being what Michigan was before last year, being a transcendent year and them leveling up and beating Ohio State, winning the Big Ten. I think this will be a very good team. 9.5 wins is a great number. I think they're right at that 9-10 threshold. I'm going to go 9 wins because I do think there's enough teams on this schedule that can beat them. And like I said, I know there's a slam dunk. They're definitely losing to Ohio State this year based on how things went last year.
I'm going to go over slightly. I'm going to go 10-2 on Michigan. Last year, strength of this team was definitely the defense, right? So, I mean, they had a first-round talent, an edge rusher, and Aiden Hutchinson, David Ajabo as well, Daxton Hill, highlighting that defense. They do not return a ton from that defense. So, returning production actually on defense, they rank 124th in the country. So, that defense will not be what it was last year, on top of them losing their defensive coordinator. Offensive returning production, though, 13th in the country. So I think this is a team that flips their strength, where last year the strength being the defense. I think this year the strength will be the offense. And I compare Michigan's offense to Georgia's offense in that super efficient offense. And I think when you watch Michigan, you probably think like, that's old school style ball. They run the ball a lot, not as fun. And they're just super efficient. Harbaugh actually used both quarterbacks really well last year, which it's hard to use any 2 quarterback system well. And he did. Unfortunately, I imagine that's what we're going to see at least to start the year, because the thing is, McNamara, he's just safe, right? He just takes care of the football. McCarthy, way higher ceiling, but you get a little bit of that, YOLO in him, but way higher ceiling. So I think they play both, but I just don't see McNamara losing the starting job in Harbaugh's mind, at least early on.
Right.
You mentioned their receiver room. They get back Ronnie Bell, who was injured in game 1 last year, torn ACL. So he is an electric receiver that, I mean, literally it was on a long pass play last year in the first game that he got injured. He's to take the top off the defense kind of guy. If Ohio State has the best 2 tackles in the conference, I think Michigan has the best 2 guards with Zach Zinter and Trevor Keegan. So they were part of that Joe Moore award-winning offensive line last season. The schedule sets up nice in that you do get Penn State and Michigan State at home. Obviously, you go to Ohio State on the road. I'm chalking that up as a loss. And, I mean, can you win one of the Michigan State and Penn State games? I think so. Every other team, they should be way more talented than. And you should win every other one of those games if you're Michigan. So I do think the defense takes a step back, but this, I think, will be a super efficient offense. And, I mean, preseason, I'm looking at Michigan as a top 5 team. It's up to them to prove that, and I think the off-the-field stuff will play a role into that. But I think this is a team that is very capable of winning 10 games. And if you're a Michigan fan, I think that's what you should expect at this point is 10 games. You got over the hump last year. You have to follow it up with an encore performance. Not saying you got to go in the Big Ten in the encore performance, but you do got to go in 10 games to prove that, like, you're here to stay. So that's at least what I will cautiously expect from Michigan this year is 10 and 2. But I like that number at 9.5. I think that's a dang good number. Let's go to Penn State, Daniel. Penn State, a team that coming off of honestly a couple of disappointing seasons, but nonetheless, people's infatuation with Jim Harbaugh keeps getting him a raise and contract extensions. So 7-6 last year, including that bowl game. But I mean, Vegas doesn't balk. 8.5 win total except for Penn State. So where are you going with the Nittany Lions?
Yeah, Penn State. It's interesting because they lose a couple guys off the defense last year. You know, Arnold a Big D, their leading sack guy, and they still return 6 guys. So I do like what they're bringing back. Got a good defensive line. It looks like Sean Clifford. He's been a talking point, somewhat of a punching bag. It is nice to have a returning starter back. I'll at least leave it at that. But 4 of their top 5 receivers are coming back, which I think is a big deal as far as continuity, as far as taking a next step. But they only have, I guess they have 2 returning offensive linemen. They're one of their top running backs last year, Noah Kane. He ended up transferring to LSU. And so they don't have quite the depth that they had before in the backfield. So interested to see what happens there. They are a very good tight end team. Brenton Strange, and Theo Johnson, I think is a phenomenal tandem. And I think it highlights what Sean Clifford will do well as far as middle of the field throws, big body guys who can, really get open and provide a big target for a quarterback that's going to need the help, to be frank.
He's the Big Ten Stetson Bennett.
Yeah, he is. Looking at their schedule, though, I do love that they start at Purdue. I like having a Big Ten game to open the season. That's just, I would always recommend that. But then they get that return trip. Auburn came up there for the whiteout last year. They're going to be going back to Jordan-Hare in week 3. So not to tip my hand, but I don't think they make it out of Jordan-Hare unscathed. They're losing that game. So, and I think Penn State's a good ball club. I just think that people don't realize the difficulty of playing in that stadium. Looking through the rest of the schedule, obviously I think that they're gonna take care of what they need to as far as their West opponents. Minnesota, the most difficult West opponent, is at home. They get Ohio State at home. That's going to be, a rocking place. They're going to play at Michigan this year, and then they get Michigan State at home at the end of the year. So a lot of their tough games they get at home. This was an 8.5 win total.
8.5.
Okay. I sound like I'm high on them. I am going under. I like 8-4 for this team. I think they're a very good ball club. They're going to have 3 Big Ten losses, and then the 4th one being to Auburn. So that's where I have them. I think they're a solid team. You'll see how good of a coach James Franklin is in a season like this, where if they go 10-2, when you start talking about him, we were kind of talking about him being one of those stale coaches outside of the top 10. He kind of work his way back up into that top 10.
You've gone under on every team so far. I've gone over on every team so far. Let's just keep it up. I'm going over. I think Penn State bounces back to 2019 Penn State. 10-2. Let's just go win 10 games, Penn State. Let's make it happen. Look, they got their Stetson. All right. And if anything, he is efficient. That's all I can say about and Sean Clifford. Look, you lose Jahan Dotson, but you gain through the transfer portal. Learn this name, people. Mitchell Tinsley. All right. Where was he last year? Transfer, Western Kentucky. All right. He had 1,400 receiving yards last year in that video game offense at Western Kentucky. So he transfers to Penn State. Very, very similar play style to Jahan Dotson. So you replace that and then return all those pass catchers. I mean, people around Penn State are talking about Nicholas Singleton in the same breath as, I don't know, Saquon Barkley. And I don't think you say that lightly, because if you know how transcendent of a running back he was, even for Penn State, I mean, that's high praise. So to be talking about someone like that gives me encouragement. I think the offense will be fine. I'm not expecting them to be great. I'm expecting them to be fine. This defense, though, is going to be a top 5 unit in college football. This is a team who, I mean, every position group on their defense is going to be top 2 or 3 in the Big Ten. Their defensive line, I expect a big pass rush. PJ Mustafer. Oh my God, I'm going to butcher his name. Gotcha. Sorry, PJ. He phenomenal on the interior defensive line as well, a run stopper and someone who can really disrupt the passing game from the inside. Their linebackers, I mean, they you know, it's Penn State. They've put out 1,000 linebackers. Curtis Jacobs, he's a sophomore now, so he's a former 4-star, highly rated 4-star at linebacker. And then, I mean, defensive back, not a ton of starters returning, but these are talented guys. Again, Penn State's been recruiting fine. They just haven't put it on the field altogether. So I am going to cautiously just buy a Penn State bounce back here. And I think it rides on their defense this year. So phenomenal defense, a good enough offense, 10-2. I think Penn State's back this year. So I'll go over 10-2 for Penn State. Let's go to a team that shocked a lot of people last year, Michigan State. They won 11 games last year, believe it or not, win the Peach Bowl, beat Pitt in the Peach Bowl, so 1 New Year's Six Bowl. They come back, win total set at 7.5. So is Tuck coming, Daniel?
Oh, he's coming. So 7.5. Okay. Things are going to change for me here. I am going to go over, but so a lot of this is based off of returning Jaden Reed, very big deal at receiver. He's their top receiver from last year, over 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns. You know, they're returning the starting quarterback, Peyton Thorne. Take it or leave it. He's returning starting quarterback. He was fine. I think that at times he was very good. And he had his moments where, I mean, when they beat Michigan, that was a very big deal. You know, returning someone on the offensive line is a big deal. They get the transfer, Daniel Barker, at tight end from Illinois. And then they get the transfer, Jarek Broussard at running back. He's from Colorado, and he's coming from, obviously, Mel Tucker recruited him. He had 600 plus yards last year, and he's one of the big time players. Jalen Berger, transferring in from Wisconsin at running back. So a couple of, 3 transfers there on the offensive side of the ball, I think will really supplement what they've got going on and help with continuity. You also throw in Jordan Simmons there. I think that, he was the second leading the rusher last year. So all that together, I think they're going to have a good stable of backs. They're going to be able to do what they want to do, play action, get the ball down the field to Jaden Reed and Trey Mosley. Defensively, this is where I think they're going to shine because they're returning 8 starters and just more development under Mel Tucker and under defensive coordinator Scotty Hazelton. I think that's a big deal. They get the transfer from Georgia, Amir Speed. He's a former highly rated 4-star cornerback coming in from obviously the national champions and from a defense that's historic. And he played a good bit. He definitely played a lot of special teams. So I think him coming in, helping that secondary is going to be a very big deal. They've got their top 2 returning tacklers coming back, Cal Halliday and Xavier Henderson. So all that being said, looking at this schedule, it lines up good for them. They start out with Western Michigan and then Akron, and then they play at Washington. And that's a fun game for the
That's a
sheer fact of
sneaky game.
finding out like what each of these teams is going to be. But I think they go there and win that game. I'm big on Michigan State this year. Coming home against Minnesota, I have a higher probability of them losing that than losing to Washington. But they do get a lot of their difficult games at home. Wisconsin at home, Ohio State at home. So all that being said, I have them over. I have them at 8-4 this year.
I'm going to go over again, except I'm going to top you again and go 9-3.
Okay.
For Michigan State. So these losses are going to come somewhere. I can promise you that. It's coming. Episode's halfway over. Michigan State, obviously, they're going to have a very tough time replacing Kenneth Walker, right? Replacing that production.
Right.
That was their offense last year. Jalen Naylor at receiver. How much do you think was Peyton Thor versus having Jalen Naylor at receiver? Well, we're going to find out this season. I'm not super high on him at quarterback, but again, he was their starter. He won them 11 games. He's a good quarterback. This team is highlighted by the defense, though. You mentioned two players I was going to mention, Cal Halladay, Xavier Henderson. Those are two all Big Ten type of players. I mean, between Cal Halladay and Simeon Barrow at linebacker for Michigan State, I mean, they're going to have one of the best linebacking cores in the Big Ten this year. Mel Tucker putting his thumbprint on the secondary, definitely his specialty there. So this is a team that I think is going to have a top 15 defense in college football. And then, similar question I've asked opposite with other teams is how good does the offense have to be a top 15 caliber team? And top 30 is what I need the offense to be able to do that. So I think Michigan State can do that this year. You mentioned the schedule. At Washington's a sneaky game. Seattle's not an easy place to play. You do draw Wisconsin and Minnesota out of the Big Ten West. So I think those three games alone is what's playing into this lower win total. I mean, on top of the fact that every year you have to play Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State, and two of those are on the road. So tough schedule for Michigan State. But, I mean, count me just buying the hype that Mel Tucker knows what he's doing. And that last year was, I don't think, an anomaly. I think they overachieved.
Yeah.
But I think that 9-3 can be something we can expect from Michigan State under Mel Tucker. So that's what I'm buying, in that Mel Tucker has raised the floor of this program and the ceiling, but that the bottom does not fall out like this win total indicates. So I don't think 8-4 will be the bottom falling out either. I think 8-4 is a very good season for Michigan State this year, especially given their schedule. I'm just going to buy into the hype a little bit and go 9-3.
Jacob, you sold me. Put me down for 9-3. All right.
9-3. Love it. All right. 9-3. Love it. All right. Heck yeah. What do they say? Sparty up. I don't know what they say. Go green. Tuck coming. There you go. Tuck
That's
coming.
what they say.
All right. Here come the losses. Let's go to Maryland.
Here they come.
Maryland's win total set at 6. This is year what of Loxley? Is this year 3, 4? Has he been there 4 years?
Let's go to the chart.
I think it's year 4.
This is year 4.
Haha, nailed it. Year 4 of Mike Loxley. He's recruited pretty decently from Maryland. Hey, you got a Tagovailoa at quarterback, so you never know what can happen there. But their win total set at 6. They're in a very tough division. Daniel, where are you going with the Terrapins?
Yeah, so looking through this, they get a big time recruit, Ramon Brown. That's one thing Loxley has done so far, is he's really recruited well, especially the offensive side of the ball. Ramon Brown, a high 4-star rated running back coming in from Virginia. And then, they returned 2 of their top 4 receivers, but honestly, if you're going to ask me for which 2 they should return, it would be their 2 most talented guys, and that's Rakeem Jarrett, the former 5-star, Dante Demas Jr., the former highly rated 4-star. I'm not sure if he was ever a 5-star. He may have been as well. You add to that the transfer Jacob Copeland coming in from Florida, initially highly recruited, touted player. I like where this is going for them. They returned 5 offensive linemen, and then a Tagovailoa at quarterback. So we'll see what's going on. He had a very productive year last year, 3,800 yards, 26 touchdowns, 11 picks. I'm wondering if that's the right mix offensively, because I do think that they're going to beat up on bad teams like they have been. Are they going to be able to score on the teams that are more talented than them? That's going to be the big question going forward. Defensively, they returned 7 starters. I think that's important. Looking at this schedule, I is this a 6.5 win total?
Solid 6.
Oh, it's right at 6. Cowards. I have them as a bowl team, so I'll go ahead and say it's at least a push. It's a tough stretch down the stretch. I'm going to stay at 6. I'm going to say they're 6-6 this year.
6-6. I'm with you. I'm also going to push. It's the Vegas Cowards that caused me to do this.
Yes.
So 6-6. I'm with you. The schedule, anytime we draw Wisconsin out of the West, it's not great for your schedule. They've actually got some tough group of 5 teams. So getting Charlotte on the road is weird for a Big Ten team, but SMU as well. So those are not 2 easy games. Those are definitely not pushover games that you just want to, you just chalk up W's and move on,
right.
Especially for Maryland. So you get Michigan on the road, you get Penn State on the road, but you do get Michigan State and Ohio State at home. I expect this offense to be, a top 20 unit in college football. So the offense definitely the highlight of this team. The defense, man, they got some work to do. This is a team that gave up 66 points to Ohio State last year. So defense still has a long way to go. So I think they're really going to struggle against teams that can put up points because, again, how much can you count on Maryland to just answer every score? Not against teams that are that much more talented than you. But I still think this is a team that you put them in a different division, they're going to have a way better record. But you're in the Big Ten East. So 6-6 for Maryland is what I'm going. 3-6 in conference. That solid 5 team in the Big Ten East. And then, another bowl team for Mike Loxley and the Terrapins. All right, now here we are at our 4 win total teams. We're going to start with Indiana. So Indiana, you and I were talking, Daniel. This is the 2020 team that went 6-2. Argued they should have gone to the Big Ten championship because of the weird COVID rules. And then last year was 2-10. So what was the anomaly? Was it the second in the Big Ten East in 2020, or was it the 2 wins last year? Their win total set at 4.
Yeah, this was tough because, while we all love Tom Allen.
And they love each other.
And what they did, a couple years ago, we really need to find out what this team's made of. They get a couple of SEC transfers on the offense. Connor Basilic coming in from Mizzou, and Sean Shivers coming in from Auburn as a running back. In the limited amount that I saw him at Auburn, I think that he's got a very he's very explosive. He's got a lot of potential. Him as the lead back, I'm not sure how that's going to play out. It's one of those things where, it's like he's great maybe in a reserve role, but when he's the feature guy, maybe he doesn't quite produce at that same clip. So Connor Basilic, he started for 2 years in the SEC. That's something that you can say about him. There's been times where he has looked like a very efficient quarterback, but most of the time he looks like a guy who is just existing and trying to keep the ship afloat. It's tough to determine if that was what was around him or if that was him in and of itself. Either way, he's not an answer to this offense. He just may not hurt the offense necessarily. So that's kind of my stance on Basilic coming in. It's interesting. We get a name, that a guy we know who started for another program in a good conference, and he's moved here. So he's a competent starting quarterback, but I don't know beyond that what he's going to be. This team doesn't return a whole lot. We're talking about receiving. They only have one of their top 5 returning receivers, and it's Javon Swinton, only 115 yards last year. That being said, I looking at the schedule, I mean, this is the team that we're circling a lot as a loss or as a win on everybody else's schedule. So they're going to be circling a bunch of losses. 4 wins. I was looking as much as I could to go over or at least push, but I'm even going under. I think they're a 3-win team. So I've got them at 3-9.
Do they win a Big Ten game, do you think?
A Big Ten game? I think so. Yeah. I'm circling either at Rutgers or Purdue.
Illinois, Purdue. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. If they won Illinois and then lost the rest of their Big Ten, because Illinois is their first game, that would be kind of depressing. Not winning the game, but losing the rest of them. But anyways, yeah, I 3-9.
I'm a simple man. I'm out on Tom Allen. I love him. Great guy. I'm out on Tom Allen at Indiana. You're playing in one of the hardest divisions of college football. You can't keep up with culture. You got to have players. You know what Ohio State does to culture? They score 66 on you. That's what they do to culture. Yeah, I'm out on Tom Allen, 3-9. Don't win a Big Ten game. Under. I'm just sorry. That's it for me on Indiana.
Very much Tom Herman energy. Okay, cool. Hook 'em.
Okay, cool. Hook 'em. Last
and least
win total wise. Also with 4 is Rutgers. So Greg Schiano, third year back, not third year here necessarily.
Right.
Is this right? Did he spend like over a decade at Rutgers previously?
Yeah, he did.
Oh, wow.
Because nobody realized who he was until like the last few years there. So it seems like he was only there for 4 years. And then you're like, wait a second.
11.
That's just when Ray Rice was there. And we found, they started figuring
11
things
years. Out. Wow. I thought that was a typo. I had no idea. Anyway, third year back at Rutgers. Daniel, I wanted to buy the Rutgers hype last year. Thankfully, I backed off. I thought they were going to be a bowl team last year. Initially, you and I were talking, and I was like, right. I don't know, man. I'm buying it. I think they're going to do it. Right. I'm glad you talked me off that ledge. But their win total set at 4. So what are you expecting from the Scarlet Knights?
Yeah, so while I do think that they're headed in the right direction, it's tough for me to do blue sky with a team that's in a division like this. It just is what it is. It's like we talk about the SEC West and you talk about like Mississippi State, for example. Like there are so many teams ahead of you, but you're doing everything right. So they recruited well. They had 4-star players in this last recruiting class, a couple linebackers, offensive linemen, and a running back. So looking at that, I'm thinking, hey, these guys are going to project really well in a couple of years. This is a developmental type program. Get some good talent like that in, and it can really do wonders. I think Schiano's the right coach for this team. That being said, I mean, the 5 returning starters on offense, 5 on defense is very average. For me, it comes down to, are they going to beat Indiana? And are they going to beat Maryland? Because I think those are their peers. Maryland's just a tick above because they have some answers on offense, and that's always nice to hear that a team has answers. But, I'm going to circle that one as that's a potential win for them. But looking at this, they're right at 4 wins as well. Is theirs on the button at 4?
4 wins. Yep.
Okay. I'm going to push. I'm going to say 4-8.
4-8. I'm going under again. 3-9. Same as but I'm with you on they're heading in the right direction. I think it's just going to take some more time. Like you said, it's hard to go up in wins, even if you're doing the right stuff, because everyone else is doing what you're doing too in that division.
Right.
It's like, oh, we got 4 stars. Well, Ohio State got 17.
Yes.
Or Penn State got 16 and Michigan got 16 and Michigan State got 16 and Maryland got 5. And it's like, great. Well, Let me ask you this, Daniel. If this is a Big Ten West team, are they a bowl team? Drop them in the Coastal. How's that? ACC Coastal.
They're a bowl team in the Coastal.
I think so too.
This season. But yeah, and I think that they would honestly get better players if they were in one of those, because I think there's a certain amount of teams or a certain amount of players that don't want to go to a team that they know will never win the conference.
Right.
So it's a tough deal.
It's tough. Well, that wraps up our Big Ten East. We will be back next week with the Big Ten West. So going through Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, believe it or not, the defending Big Ten West champs. I still don't believe it. That's going to overcorrect at some point. But we'll talk about those teams next week. You can follow us on social media at the Extra Point Pod on Facebook and Instagram. You can follow him on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Barnes with a K. And that will do it for this edition of the Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob. See ya.